Hey everybody, it's Jack with Future Pastimes, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Dune Prophecy Episode 3, which is called Sisterhood Above All. And this is the best episode yet in the series. We're halfway through the first season. It's only 6 episodes long, and I'm really enjoying it more and more. And each successive episode is increasing my enjoyment overall of the previous episodes because we're filling in more of the backstory, more of the motivations, some of the mysteries. They're not necessarily getting clearer, but we're getting more context for stuff. And we're starting to see how the pieces fit together. And we're seeing how this can play out. And it's really interesting. And probably my favorite part of the episode is how we're getting in more and more details of the Dune universe, which I particularly enjoy. So this episode is largely a flashback to earlier, especially when we're talking about Valia. She has only just started training at the Bene Gesserit school, and this is before she uses the voice on Dorothea to kill her, which we saw in the first episode. But we're seeing some of their rivalry and how things worked out, along with Reverend Mother Raquella and her plan of succession with the sisterhood and what the sisterhood can and should be, and some really interesting details there with how that is playing out. And we get some more insight into the rivalry between House Harkonnen and House Atreides, with some more insights into that. And so one of the first things that we're getting a look at in this episode is some of how House Harkonnen is faring here after the Machine War. And we get a look at some whale fur as they are carving it up right there on the beach. And so that's pretty fascinating as we're on Lankavale, which is where the Harkonnens were basically exiled to, or what they were forced to endure there after the Machine War, the Butlerian Jihad. And before they end up getting to Gedi Prime, which presumably they went there because it was a very resource-rich planet at the time, until they stripped it and whatnot. But we're getting some insight into the power plays there, and we meet Valia and Tulia's brother, Griffin. And I think it's fun that his name is Griffin, and that was true in the prequel books by Brian and Kevin. And but the idea that maybe the sigil for House Harkonnen, as we in the board gaming world at least know, that may have been its genesis in order to honor him. And it's interesting, he's went to the Landsraad to kind of plead their case and ended up dead at the hands, presumably, of the Atreides. And Valia and Tula concoct this plan of revenge involving Tula infiltrating the Atreides, getting in on their good side, and then cold murdering a whole bunch of them right before hunting a Seleucid bull. And there's lots of great imagery. There's just the whole idea of the Seleucid bull. The bull represents the Harkonnen, but also the sort of the old Greek Atreus, I think, legend where he fights the bull. So it's nice. The show it clearly is pulling from a lot of mythology and story archetypes, which I'm not going to get into. It's not my expertise, but I definitely recognize these sorts of things. But I think at the same time, they're not forcing themselves to follow a particular story arc. No classic archetypal story arc. I think they're borrowing and lifting and getting inspiration from a lot of them. because I think I've certainly listened to some analysis and watched some other videos where people get more into that sort of thing, but there doesn't seem to be consensus. There's a lot of pick and choose whatever you want, and this could be applied here and this could be applied there. And I think the reason why they do that is because they don't want to be so predictable about where they may be going with something, and I enjoy that. I appreciate that. And I think as for writers, that's the desire, is to not necessarily emulate something to the point where you can just predict where it's going to go as a story, but to feed the conspiracies and the analysis of the fandom at large. In the Lost years, there was a lot of that going on. People trying to predict, they're trying to unravel like what story, classic story arc. Or archetype was Lost trying to use, and Lost went out of their way. Those writers went out of their way to not go into one that could be figured out, and I think as a result, they didn't really. It was kind of a hodgepodge, and at the end, you're like, yeah, they didn't really solve much, or a few of these mysteries were really figured out. They were kind of trying to form their own. I think there's probably more going on behind the scenes here with the Sisterhood, and they are having to operate within known results. We know, how long it takes for the Sisterhood to get to the Kwisatz Haderach. We know, those of us who are familiar with the books, we know it comes after Paul, and how that feeds into the Bene Gesserit plans and their fears, and they are pointing to some stuff that is referenced by the God Emperor. But they're interpreting it, incorrectly. So there was this whole idea, this prophecy from the previous episode where, it's about somebody born twice, once of blood and once of spice. And Valia is like, that's Desmond Hart. She doesn't even hesitate. She thinks that's who that is. But we who know Dune lore a lot more, we're like, well, Desmond Hart is never mentioned again. So we think that that's talking about something so far down the line, thousands of years. That's what really the Reverend Mother Raquella was really talking about. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they do go with that, and how much of my reading into book lore. And book lore takes two forms. It's the Frank lore and then the expanded lore. What are they talking about? And or are they forging a new path? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I enjoyed the fact that Valia is exiled, basically, not exiled, but, she's kicked out of the Imperial Palace, but she doesn't leave. So she goes and visits her father, and who is in a suspensor chair. So future echoes of Baron Harkonnen. I don't think that this guy is in the same league as Vladimir Harkonnen, but it'll be interesting to see if he ends up joining forces with Valia to maneuver things. And because we also have this wild card of another Atreides. So Kieran Atreides, who is currently part of the rebellion that Valia is orchestrating, and is she over it enough? Does she feel like they've gotten enough revenge? I doubt it. This type of character usually doesn't ever fully quench their bloodthirst. So I'm interested to see where that goes and how it plays out. The other kind of interesting curveball we got was with Lila, who, quote unquote, died from the agony, wasn't able to fully, deal with that poison in her system, or there was some sort of possession element that may be factored into it. But she's not gone, because Tula has her hidden down in the DNA crypt, and has AI trying to find a way to revive her in some way. So that is definitely going to be a factor. And we know that Dorothea was speaking through her. She had tapped into that genetic memory, and she is probably hot for some kind of revenge. I'm sure this is a memory, but she remembers what happened to her, so that certainly could play into it. I suspect we will see some kind of possession element. I don't think we're done with Lila, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The other thing I really enjoyed was the other acolytes that were brought in to say goodbye to Lila, and how there's a little bit of there's two camps, almost two camps forming the same way that they were when Valia was younger, the Dorothea camp and the Valia camp, and that power struggle, which Raquella was not thrilled about. But you could have a similar parallel going on in here, where the one acolyte was like, she was not ready, and you, Tula, you knew it, and they tried to, the old Reverend Mother was like, put the kibosh on that, but she's not a powerful Reverend Mother like Valia is, and so I don't think that she's going to be able to snuff that out. I think there's going to be some rivalry. There's going to be some we're being used as pawns, and I think that'll be interesting to see how that develops. One of the things that I noticed in the opening credits was a Gam Jabbar, and so I will be very curious to see if we get Gam Jabbar element brought into the show. It hasn't shown up anywhere else, and it'll be interesting to see where they go with that, because for my part, I have never really been much of a fan and one who subscribes to this notion that I see a lot of other people talk about when they're talking about the Bene Gesserit. And they like to say, yeah, the Bene Gesserit, they go around the Imperium testing to see if people are human. And I know that it was very briefly touched on in Dune, in the first book, when Jessica was like, oh, my son survived and he's human. But it never really shows up again, and I always thought that was a little bit silly, just the idea that the Bene Gesserit would be going around testing people to see if they're human. They have been tracking DNA for 10,000 years. They know if somebody is human. They knew everything about Paul Atreides, his lineage and whatnot, and they didn't know if he was the Kwisatz Haderach, and I don't think that's not really what she was testing. She was testing his self-control. And in the movie, that was really very much the focus. They never even mentioned this notion of humanity and testing to see if you're human. And I've had some debates with some people about that. What does that really mean? You're not human or inhuman, or, it's more of a poetic license of humanity. And I think I think that sounds like rationalization to me. So it'll be interesting. They did gloss over it completely. It was not important. The whole point of that Gam Jabbar test, which is why they also applied it to Fade, which does not happen in the book, but that it's reinforcing their perspective of what are they really testing, and it'll be interesting to see how they tap into that, and even if they do, and what the focus is for that. So that's what I'm intensely curious about. Let me know in the comments, where you fall on that controversy. Not that it's really a controversy, but I'm certainly trying to make it into one. And your thoughts on where they're going to go with that. I did enjoy some of we're getting, little hints of what could be considered Prana Bindu training. Not so much. I'd love to see some more of that. I love that in the earlier episodes, they had shown how some of their techniques and how they do the truth saying, which seemed to be one of the primary focuses of having the Bene Gesserit school, and that was their primary usefulness in the Imperium, was tapping into that skill. But we know, as readers of Dune and the future stories, that the Bene Gesserit have a lot more tricks up their sleeve. They get into the imprinting, and then certainly the voice is a major factor, which they do try to keep a lid on. There's an interesting scene in the book where Jessica lets Tufir Hawat know about the voice. And so it's interesting that this is a Mentat and a Master of Assassins, not really aware that the Bene Gesserit have this ability. They certainly have always been suspicious and wary of the Bene Gesserit, and I think anybody can see when you have an organization that has penetrated every other organization practically. It doesn't seem to be a lot of Bene Gesserit hanging out with the Guild, but who can say? We haven't really seen the Guild, and we will not see the Guild in this season of of prophecy. They're not going to spill the beans on what navigators look like or any insight into the guild until after Messiah comes out. But yeah, by what we know, they really don't. They're not so much into Chom, and they're not so much into the guild, and they're not so much into whatever the Tleilaxu are up to. Now I talked about in the last episode. There's really no Desmond Hart in episode 3 of the show. So we haven't gotten any closer to some answers about how he has this ability to set people on fire from within. Is it an Ixian device? I don't know. Is he a Gola? We don't know. We don't know too much more. There's only 3 more episodes. So if we're going to get any answers, and we might not get any real answers this season, which will be a little bit of a letdown. But I suspect that we may get a very Desmond Hart focused episode. I would love to see that. I want to get some more insight. I want to have the veil removed and figure this out. But this was originally going to be called Dune: The Sisterhood, and so the main focus of the show is on the Sisterhood, which I think is fine. I think they're a fascinating organization, and I like that. But Dune is a big universe, and so I do want to get some more details on other elements of the Duneverse, as it were. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Are you enjoying the series? Are you watching it? What are the things that you like the most? What do you hope to see? What are your pet theories about things that are going on? Let us all know in the comments, and maybe we'll get into some other stuff. And let me know if you have any questions about anything. I don't know that I will have any answers, but I will certainly I will at least act like I might have answers and have some speculation. No, I won't do that. I will speculate, but I'm not going to pretend like I have any other insight. I do not. Don't know much more than what anyone else does. Although, again, I've read all the books, and so I like how it is connecting to these books. And but again, some of it I might just be reading into these connections. So I don't think that I am. But again, we'll see. We'll eventually find out, or we won't, I guess. But that's how it is. That's it for this one, everyone. Thanks for joining me, and I will hopefully see you again soon.